Hello everybody. So here we are in chapter 4, and here are my thoughts. So at the beginning of the chapter, they're going to introduce you to some of the classic theories on learning, and you're going to read or learn about behaviorism, classical behaviorism with Pavlov. And you remember, you studied Pavlov in high school or college perhaps, with the dog and salivating, learning how we learn. And Skinner with Skinner's box, and all the myths about Skinner putting his daughter in a box and whatnot. That's not true. But anyway, read about it, and then the cognitive theories on learning, as well as Rogers' constructivism theory on learning. And those are interesting, and it's a good introduction to, because bottom line, we are talking about learning something, a language, a second language. So it's complicated because some people refer to it as acquisition of language. That's different from learning. And there's arguments on both sides, but these theories will give you a good introduction to the remaining of the chapter, which I think is where the real material is. You're gonna read about the 8 types of learning that have been historically identified. And, always keep in mind your ELLs in your head. As you're reading all these things, keep in mind your students and see how these things, these theories apply to your students, and if it's something that you agree or disagree with them. Of course, after the 8 theories of learning, that's when we're going to get to things that we see more clearly manifested in our classrooms, like transfer, interference, and overgeneralization. Transfer is when knowledge from one content is transferred efficiently and positively to another. In this case, from your L1, knowledge about that L1 can be possibly transferred to acquiring or learning the second language. Interference is when the first one is interference and with the learning of the second one. And overgeneralization is when, without considering the first language, when you're just acquiring the second language, you overgeneralize and you make some reasoning that may not be correct. The book gives you some examples in English on how people put the extra auxiliary verbs when they don't have to. If we always do the auxiliary don't for negation in English. I eat, I don't eat. I watch, I don't watch. I play, I don't play. I can, I don't can. Oh, that's an overgeneralization. We do that in Spanish. I'm pretty positive overgeneralization is a universal principle. But in Spanish, we do as well, the yo form of the verbs. Hablo, como, tengo, digo, sabo. So, a lot of children in Spain, at least, they will say yo sabo. And only through repetition and correction, they will change to the correct yo sé. And that's just overgeneralization. That happens across the board. Then also in theories of learning, you're going to discuss and read about inductive versus deductive reasoning, from the parts to the whole, from the whole to the parts. Not one is better than the other. It's just different ways that people acquire knowledge, different ways that people reach truth. You're also going to read about language aptitude. Are there some humans that are more apt to learning a language than others? Is there theory? Is there research? Are there theories that can support that? You're going to read about that. And then you're also going to talk about IQ and intelligence, and the G factor, intelligence in the IQ, as well as the more modern EQ, emotional intelligence. How do your emotions interfere with learning or with rational reasoning? And that's the chapter in a snapshot. The chapter ends with 2 methods of learning, the audiolingual method and the community language learning, similar to the natural approach, I think. It's got the small group of 6, 7 with the teachers in there. They're all sitting down, and they're good descriptions. And some of the discussion questions may go around those methods, and I'm curious to see if any of you use them or what you think about them. But you can, there's so many things that you can choose from in this chapter. I mean, the concepts of interference, transfer, overgeneralization are huge to understand our ELLs acquiring English and to evaluate them correctly. Intelligence, emotional intelligence. I'm curious to see if any of you touch on that topic, because I've got I got my own thoughts on emotional intelligence. I think it's culturally biased. I think emotions, lack thereof, or expression of emotions, and the assumption that emotions interfere with logical reasoning may be heavily loaded with some cultural bias. I'm just going to leave it right there. It may not, there's tons of research on emotional intelligence from Latinos as well who disagree with me. Just over the weekend, I was watching the Spain soccer game with an Argentinian, another Spaniard, and a Peruvian. And this Argentinian is actually a coach for emotional intelligence. And I had a vivid discussion with him about it. So there's points of disagreement on all ends. Language aptitude. I'm curious to see if any of you touch on whether you believe that some people have better brains to learn language than others. Reasoning. How do we acquire knowledge? Are you one from the parts to the whole, or do you like to look from the whole to the parts? And I'll take even a step further. Do you use them both? It depends on the context. I've realized that myself because I took recently a learning styles questionnaire, and in those questions about the parts to the whole or the whole to the parts, I realized that it depends on the topic to me. Like, it depends on the scenario and the content. I like them both. I can see myself operating rationally and effectively in either one. Sometimes I need the parts to understand the whole, and sometimes I understand the whole and then I dig into the parts and see how that whole is constructed. I don't think my entire life is shaped in one or the other. So anyway, and the 8 types of learning that research has identified. I'm curious to see if any of you have to discuss any of that. So there they are. Here are my thoughts on chapter 4. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say. Bye.